What's the dumbest school rule that almost got someone killed? Our high school had this zero-tolerance phone policy that started my junior year after some incident with social media drama. If they caught you with your phone out during school hours, automatic detention and confiscation until your parents personally picked it up. No exceptions, no matter what the circumstance. I thought it was stupid but mostly harmless until last Tuesday during third period chemistry class. I was sitting behind this kid Marcus, who I barely knew from around school. Quiet guy, kept to himself, always sat in the same spot 2 rows from the front near the windows. About halfway through Mrs. Patterson's lesson on molecular bonds, I noticed Marcus acting weird in ways that didn't make sense. He kept touching his forehead and looking around the room like he was confused about where he was. His hand was shaking when he tried to write notes in his notebook. Mrs. Patterson was droning on about covalent structures and intermolecular forces when Marcus suddenly gripped the edge of his desk with both hands. His knuckles went completely white from the pressure. He was breathing funny too, these quick, shallow breaths that sounded wrong and urgent. I leaned forward and whispered, asking if he was okay. He turned to look at me and his face was pale and covered in sweat despite the classroom being cool. His pupils looked huge and unfocused, like he couldn't see properly. He tried to say something, but his words came out slurred and jumbled, like his tongue wasn't working right. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong with him. I reached for my phone to text someone for help or call the nurse, but immediately remembered the strict rule. If Mrs. Patterson saw me with my phone out, I'd get automatic detention and she'd confiscate it until my parents came to school. I looked around the classroom, hoping someone else would notice Marcus was in obvious trouble, but everyone was either taking notes or completely zoned out, staring at the clock waiting for lunch. Mrs. Patterson had her back to us writing chemical equations on the whiteboard. Marcus was getting worse by the minute. He kept wiping sweat off his face with his sleeve and his hand was trembling so badly he couldn't hold his pencil steady. He was making these quiet moaning sounds under his breath that sounded increasingly desperate. I tried raising my hand to get Mrs. Patterson's attention, but she was completely focused on her lesson about ionic bonds and didn't turn around to notice. Marcus slumped forward in his chair and I could see he was struggling just to stay upright in his seat. I made the decision to risk the detention and pulled out my phone to call the nurse's office directly, but the exact second it came out of my pocket, Mrs. Patterson spun around like she had supernatural radar for these situations. Phone, now, detention after school, and I'm calling your parents tonight, she snapped, holding out her hand with that look teachers get when they think they've caught you red-handed doing something wrong. I tried desperately to explain that Marcus needed immediate medical help, but she cut me off saying there were absolutely no exceptions to the phone policy. She confiscated my phone and went straight back to teaching, while Marcus continued deteriorating, right in front of the entire class. His breathing was getting more labored and raspy, and he was starting to make these awful gurgling sounds deep in his throat. I tried getting up to physically go tell the nurse myself, but Mrs. Patterson immediately ordered me to sit down, saying I was being disruptive and clearly looking for excuses after getting caught breaking the phone rule during class time. That's when Marcus collapsed completely, falling sideways out of his chair and hitting the floor with a sickening thud. His whole body started jerking and convulsing violently, white foam coming out of his mouth, and that's when I finally realized he'd been having a diabetic seizure. The room explodes into chaos. Several students start screaming as Marcus's body jerks violently against the hard classroom floor, his limbs thrashing in uncontrolled spasms. The sickening sound of his head repeatedly hitting the linoleum makes my stomach lurch. Oh my God, he's dying, someone shrieks from the back row. Mrs. Patterson finally seems to register what's happening. Her chalk clatters to the floor as she turns from the whiteboard, her face draining of color. Everyone stay calm, she says, but her voice trembles and she remains frozen behind her desk, clearly unprepared for the medical emergency unfolding in front of her. I leap from my seat and sprint to the teacher's desk where the emergency phone sits. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widen as I grab it, but she makes no move to stop me. My fingers shake as I punch in the extension for the nurse's office. Nurse's office, a voice answers after 2 rings. Medical emergency, room 209. Diabetic seizure, I shout into the receiver. We need help now. I slam the phone down and rush back to Marcus. 2 other students have moved the desks away to give him space, but no one knows what to do. His convulsions seem to be getting worse, and the white foam around his mouth has a pinkish tinge now. He's bitten his tongue, or the inside of his cheek. Does anyone know if he has medicine? I ask desperately, looking around the room. A girl named Amber raises her hand shakily. He keeps insulin and stuff in his backpack, she says, but Mrs. Patterson took it yesterday when she saw him checking his blood sugar. Said medical supplies had to stay in the nurse's office. I want to scream. Instead, I kneel beside Marcus, remembering something about turning people having seizures onto their side. With help from another student, we managed to roll him into recovery position. His body continues to jerk, but at least he won't choke if he vomits. The door bursts open less than 2 minutes later, and Miss Ramirez, the school nurse, rushes in carrying a red emergency kit. She drops to her knees beside Marcus, quickly assessing the situation. How long has he been seizing? She asks sharply, already pulling a glucagon injection from her kit. About 3 minutes, I answer, watching as she expertly prepares the injection. His glucose monitor and insulin were confiscated yesterday, Amber adds quietly. He was trying to explain that to Mrs. Patterson when class started. Miss Ramirez's head snaps up, her eyes narrowing as she glances toward Mrs. Patterson, who's now backed against the whiteboard. She doesn't say anything, just turns back to Marcus and administers the glucagon injection into his thigh through his jeans. I've called 911, she says, checking Marcus's pulse. They should be here any minute. The seizure begins to subside after the injection, but Marcus remains unconscious, his breathing shallow and irregular. The entire class watches in stunned silence as Miss Ramirez monitors his vital signs, occasionally wiping the foam from his mouth with gauze. 4 minutes later, EMTs rush through the door with a stretcher and medical equipment. They take over from Miss Ramirez, hooking Marcus up to monitors and starting an IV. One of them, a woman with short gray hair, asks questions while her partner stabilizes Marcus. Diabetic student. Severe hypoglycemic episode resulting in seizure, Miss Ramirez explains. I administered glucagon approximately 5 minutes ago. His medical supplies were confiscated yesterday under school policy. The EMT's expression darkens at this last part, but she remains professional as they work to stabilize Marcus. They're preparing to transfer him to the stretcher when Principal Hoffman appears in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the light from the hallway. What's going on here? He demands, surveying the chaotic classroom. His eyes land on me standing near Marcus and the EMTs. Who authorized an emergency call without going through proper channels? Before I can answer, one of the EMTs looks up from Marcus. Sir, this student nearly died from diabetic shock. If he hadn't received emergency treatment when he did, we'd be dealing with a fatality right now. Principal Hoffman's face tightens, but he says nothing as the EMTs lift Marcus onto the stretcher. As they wheel him toward the door, we hear commotion in the hallway, raised voices getting louder as they approach. Where is my son? A man's voice thunders. Where is Marcus? A couple pushes past Principal Hoffman into the classroom, a tall man with Marcus's same dark hair and a woman clutching her purse like a lifeline, her face streaked with tears. They rush to the stretcher, the woman gently touching Marcus's pale face. He's stabilizing, the female EMT assures them. We need to get him to the hospital for further treatment. Marcus's father nods, but then his gaze sweeps the classroom, landing on Mrs. Patterson, who still hasn't moved from her position against the whiteboard. You, he says, his voice dangerously quiet. You're the teacher who took his medical supplies. Mrs. Patterson's mouth opens and closes, no sound emerging. Mr. Dela Cruz, Principal Hoffman steps forward. I understand you're upset, but upset? Marcus's father explodes. My son is having a seizure because your staff confiscated life-saving medical equipment. He could have died because of your ridiculous policies. Our policy clearly states all medications must be stored in the nurse's office. Principal Hoffman begins, but Mr. Dela Cruz cuts him off. He had a medical exemption. We filed the paperwork at the beginning of the year. He turns to his wife. Show them, Elena. Mrs. Dela Cruz fumbles in her purse with shaking hands and pulls out a folded document, thrusting it toward Principal Hoffman, signed by his doctor and notarized. He's supposed to keep his glucose monitor and emergency supplies with him at all times. Principal Hoffman takes the paper, his expression shifting as he scans it. The EMTs finish securing Marcus to the stretcher and begin moving him out. We need to go, Mrs. Dela Cruz says, following the stretcher. Mr. Dela Cruz points at Principal Hoffman, his finger trembling with rage. This isn't over, not by a long shot. As they disappear down the hallway, Principal Hoffman turns to Mrs. Patterson. My office, now. Then he addresses the class. Everyone return to your seats. Miss Ramirez will stay until a substitute arrives. Before leaving, he points at me. You, for using the emergency phone without authorization, report for detention after school. The class erupts in protests, but I just nod numbly. I saved Marcus's life and I'm still getting detention. As Principal Hoffman and Mrs. Patterson leave, I notice the school secretary hovering in the doorway, phone pressed to her ear. She's nodding rapidly, her eyes wide with panic. Yes, sir, I hear her say. The superintendent is aware of the situation. Yes, we understand the seriousness. No comment at this time. The damage control has already begun. By the next morning, everyone in school knows what happened to Marcus. The story has spread like wildfire through texts, social media, and hallway whispers. I hear at least 3 different versions before first period even starts. One claiming Marcus died and was revived in the ambulance. Another saying Mrs. Patterson physically prevented him from taking his medication. The truth is bad enough without embellishment. I'm standing at my locker when Amber approaches me, her eyes wide. How are you not suspended? She asks, leaning against the neighboring locker. Everyone's talking about how you broke the phone rule to save Marcus. Oh, I still have detention, I say, shoving my calculus textbook into my backpack. Principal Hoffman didn't budge on that. Amber's jaw drops. Are you serious? You literally saved someone's life. I shrug, trying to act like it doesn't bother me. Rules are rules, I guess. That's complete bullsh. She stops mid-word as Principal Hoffman walks by, his face tense. He doesn't acknowledge either of us, just continues down the hall where a cluster of teachers have gathered outside the staff room. Did you see the news van? Amber whispers once he's out of earshot. What? No. Channel 7 is parked right outside the main entrance. My brother saw them interviewing some parents when he dropped me off. My stomach tightens. This is bigger than I thought. Third period feels surreal without Marcus in his usual seat by the windows. Mrs. Patterson enters the classroom 5 minutes late, her normally immaculate appearance disheveled. Her hands tremble slightly as she writes the day's objectives on the whiteboard. She doesn't mention yesterday's events, doesn't acknowledge the empty desk, just launches into a lesson about ionic bonds, as if nothing happened. But everything has changed. The classroom feels charged with tension. Nobody passes notes or whispers. Every time Mrs. Patterson turns to write on the board, 27 pairs of eyes stare daggers into her back. When she asks a question about electronegativity, No one raises their hand. The silence stretches uncomfortably until she calls on someone directly. This pattern repeats throughout the entire period. Question, silence, forced participation. She never makes eye contact with me. Not once during the entire 50 minutes. After class, I overhear two teachers talking in the hallway. Emergency faculty meeting after school, one says quietly. The superintendent's coming. Did you hear about the lawsuit? The other responds. Marcus's parents already have a lawyer. They're saying the school knowingly endangered their son's life. I pretend to be checking my phone as I listen. Patterson's a wreck. She was crying in the bathroom earlier, said she didn't know about his medical exemption. Well, someone dropped the ball. That boy could have died. By lunch, a petition is circulating on everyone's phones. Someone printed copies and is passing them around the cafeteria. Reform zero tolerance policies, now reads the bold heading, followed by a paragraph about how school rules should never put student safety at risk. I'm signing my name when Amber slides onto the bench beside me. Marcus is back home, she says. My mom works with his aunt. They kept him overnight for observation, but he's stable now. Thank God, I say, genuine relief washing over me. His parents are on the warpath, though. Apparently they're coming to the school board meeting tonight with their lawyer. The cafeteria buzzes with unusual energy. Students who normally don't interact are huddled together, sharing information and signing petitions. Even the seniors who typically couldn't care less about school politics are engaged, passing around a sign-up sheet for the board meeting. I'm heading to my last class when I spot Mrs. Patterson walking quickly down an empty corridor. Our eyes meet briefly before she looks away, her pace quickening. There's something in her expression I didn't expect, not just guilt or embarrassment, but genuine fear. After school, I report to detention as ordered. The room is empty except for me and Mr. Benson, the history teacher supervising today. He looks up from his book when I enter. You're the one who called for help during the diabetic emergency? He asks. I nod, taking a seat in the front row. He studies me for a moment, then closes his book. That was quick thinking. You probably saved that boy's life. Thanks, I mutter, pulling out my homework. Mr. Benson glances at the clock, then back at me. This is ridiculous. You shouldn't be here. Before I can respond, he stands up. Consider your detention served. Go home. I blink in surprise. But Principal Hoffman. I'll deal with Hoffman. He reopens his book. Go. I don't need to be told twice. As I exit through the main entrance, I see the Channel 7 news van still parked in the fire lane. A reporter is interviewing a woman I recognize as one of the school board members, who keeps repeating, we take student safety very seriously and are reviewing all relevant policies. 3 days later, Marcus returns to school. He looks paler and thinner, but otherwise okay. The most noticeable change is the bright red medical alert bracelet, now prominently displayed on his wrist. It's impossible to miss, clearly a statement, not just a medical necessity. The school board meeting that night is unlike any I've ever seen. The auditorium is packed with parents, students, and community members. Teachers line the back wall, their expressions ranging from concern to defensive misuse. Patterson sits alone in a corner, staring at her hands. Marcus's father speaks first, his voice steady but intense as he recounts how close his son came to dying because of bureaucratic inflexibility and dangerous policy enforcement. Marcus's father speaks first. His son came to dying in PH Sauls. He holds up a stack of papers. This is the medical exemption form we submitted in September, signed by Marcus's endocrinologist, explaining that he must have immediate access to his glucose monitor and insulin at all times. He places it on the table in front of the board members. And this is the acknowledgement receipt signed by your office staff. The superintendent, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, clears his throat. Mr. Dela Cruz, I want to assure you that we are taking this incident very seriously. We are conducting a comprehensive review of all our health and safety protocols. A review isn't enough, Marcus's mother interrupts, standing beside her husband. My son almost died in your classroom. We don't want your assurances. We want accountability and immediate policy changes. The crowd erupts in applause. Later that evening, the superintendent issues a statement promising to thoroughly review and reconsider policies that may inadvertently impact student health and safety. It's full of educational jargon and carefully worded non-commitments. Nothing has changed yet, but something has started. I can feel it in the hallways, see it in the way students are speaking up, hear it in the hushed conversations between teachers who now question rules they once enforced without thinking. Marcus catches my eye across the cafeteria the next day and gives me a small nod of acknowledgement. It's the first time we've directly interacted since the incident. I nod back, a silent understanding passing between us. This isn't over, not even close. The school board meeting marks a turning point, but not the one we expected. While Marcus's parents present their case with devastating clarity, the board responds with carefully rehearsed statements about reviewing policies and considering all perspectives. It's political theater designed to make it look like they're taking action, when they're really just buying time. This meeting is adjourned, announces the board president, gaveling down the rising murmurs of discontent. We'll reconvene next month with our findings. Marcus's father stands up, his face flushed with anger. A month? My son could have died in your classroom, and you need a month to figure out if your policy is dangerous? The superintendent adjusts his wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Dela Cruz, I assure you. Your assurances mean nothing, Mr. Dela Cruz cuts him off. While you're conducting your thorough review, I'll be organizing every parent in this district whose child has a medical condition. He wasn't bluffing. 2 days later, flyers appear all over town, announcing the formation of the Student Health Rights Coalition. The first meeting is held in the public library's community room, which quickly overflows with concerned parents. I slip in the back just as Mr. Delacruz takes the podium. He looks different outside of school, more commanding in his business suit, less like someone pleading for help and more like someone demanding change. My son Marcus nearly died because a teacher confiscated his medical supplies. He begins, his voice steady. When I asked the school board to change their dangerous policies, they promised a review. But reviews don't save lives. Action does. The crowd murmurs in agreement. How many of your children have asthma inhalers locked away in the nurse's office? How many diabetic students can't access their glucose monitors without a hall pass? How many of your kids with severe allergies have to walk halfway across campus to get their EpiPens? Hands raised throughout the room. Today, we're not just sharing stories, we're organizing. We're demanding immediate policy changes before another child ends up in the emergency room. Or worse, by the end of the meeting, they've formed committees, started a petition drive, and planned a press conference. Mr. Delacruz hands me a stack of flyers as I'm leaving. You saved my son's life, he says quietly. Would you be willing to tell your story at the next board meeting? I nod, surprised he even knows who I am. They're going to try to deflect blame onto individual teachers, he warns. Don't let them. This is about the policy, not just Mrs. Patterson. The next day at school, the tension is palpable. Teachers huddle in small groups between classes, conversations stopping abruptly when students walk by. Mrs. Patterson looks increasingly haggard, dark circles forming under her eyes. During chemistry, she fumbles through her lesson on ionic bonds, twice forgetting what she was saying mid-sentence. When the bell rings, I'm surprised to see her lingering by the door. Can I speak with you for a moment? She asks as other students file out. I stay in my seat, unsure what to expect. Once we're alone, she closes the door and sits at a desk across from me. I want to apologize, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know about Marcus's medical exemption. You took his glucose monitor the day before, I point out, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She nods, staring at her hands. I thought it was just another electronic device. I sent it to the office with his backpack like the policy requires. Did you ask what it was? No, the word hangs between us. I was following protocol. Marcus could have died. I know. Her voice breaks, and to my shock, tears begin streaming down her face. I've been teaching for 17 years and I've never... She stops, trying to compose herself. The administration is saying I should have known about his exemption, that it was in his file, but I never received any notification. I shift uncomfortably, unsure if I'm supposed to comfort her or continue holding her accountable. They're making me the scapegoat, she whispers. Principal Hoffman told me this morning that personnel adjustments might be necessary to restore parent confidence. Before I can respond, there's a knock at the door. It's Marcus's parents. Mrs. Patterson pales visibly, quickly wiping her eyes. We'd like to speak with you, Mrs. Delacruz says, her tone cool but not hostile. I gather my things to leave, but Mr. Delacruz stops me. Actually, we'd appreciate if you stayed. You were there. What follows is one of the most uncomfortable conversations I've ever witnessed. Mrs. Patterson breaks down completely, apologizing through sobs while explaining she never received Marcus's medical exemption paperwork. The Delacruzes listen silently until she finishes. We don't want your job, Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Delacruz finally says. We want accountability from the system that put both you and our son in this position. The confrontation ends with an unexpected alliance, Mrs. Patterson agreeing to testify at the emergency board hearing about how teachers are left in the dark about student medical conditions. The hearing is scheduled for the following week. I spend hours preparing what I'll say, rehearsing in front of my bedroom mirror until the words flow naturally. When the day arrives, the boardroom is packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and spilling into the hallway. Dr. Ramirez, the head of pediatric endocrinology at County General, presents first. With clinical precision, he explains the narrow window for intervention during diabetic emergencies. In severe hypoglycemia, brain damage can begin within 20 minutes, he explains, pointing to a chart. Death can occur within 60 minutes without treatment. The policy requiring students to secure permission, walk to the nurse's office, and wait for medication creates dangerous delays. Principal Hoffman testifies next, insisting proper protocols were followed. Our zero-tolerance policy for unauthorized electronic devices is designed to minimize distractions and prevent cheating, he explains. We have procedures for medical exemptions that simply weren't properly utilized in this case. When it's my turn to speak, my hands shake as I approach the microphone. I'm the student who called for help when Marcus had his seizure. I begin. I watched him collapse and convulse on the classroom floor while white foam came from his mouth. I watched as the teacher who had confiscated his medical supplies the day before froze in panic. The room is completely silent. I broke your phone policy to save his life, and I was punished for it with detention. That's how backward this system is. It punishes students for doing the right thing and rewards strict adherence to rules, even when those rules are dangerous. The next day, word spreads about a student walkout planned for Friday. The organizers, mostly friends of Marcus, have created a simple plan. At exactly 10:15 a.m., everyone who supports changing the phone policy will stand up and walk out of class. Administration gets wind of it and threatens automatic suspensions for participants. It doesn't matter. When Friday comes, nearly 70% of the student body walks out, assembling on the football field with homemade signs reading "Safety over silence" and "Phones save lives." Local news crews capture the entire thing. That evening, Channel 7 runs a special report titled "Dangerous Rules." When school policies put students at risk, they interview students about other incidents: a girl with asthma who couldn't reach her inhaler during gym class, a boy whose seizure medication was locked in the nurse's office when she was out sick. The pressure becomes too much. The next morning, board member Janet Wilkins announces her resignation, releasing a scathing statement. "I cannot in good conscience continue serving on a board that places administrative convenience above student safety." The unwillingness to acknowledge the unconscionable risk to student safety represented by our current policies makes my position untenable. 2 days later, the superintendent calls an emergency press conference. Standing at a podium flanked by nervous-looking board members, he announces a compromise solution. Students with documented medical conditions can now carry basic medical monitoring devices if they complete a new exemption form requiring 3 signatures and a notarized doctor's statement. This addresses the concerns raised while maintaining necessary discipline, he concludes, looking pleased with himself. Marcus's father, standing in the back of the room, calls out, "And what about phones for emergency calls when seconds count?" The superintendent's smile falters. "Our emergency response protocols failed, my son," Mr. Dela Cruz interrupts. "This isn't a compromise, it's a band-aid on a broken system." As reporters turn their cameras toward Mr. Dela Cruz, I realize this battle is far from over. The administration is hoping we'll accept their minor concession and move on. They're counting on student attention spans being short and parent outrage fading. But looking at Marcus, standing tall beside his father with his medical alert bracelet prominently displayed, I know that's not going to happen. This isn't just about phones anymore. It's about a system that values compliance over compassion, rules over reason, and policy over people. And we're just getting started. The emergency board meeting is called to order at exactly 7 p.m., 2 weeks after the student walkout. The room is packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and spilling into the hallway. I squeeze into a seat near the back, watching as board members file in with grim expressions. They know what's coming. Board President Simmons taps her microphone. "Before we begin tonight's agenda, I'd like to acknowledge the unprecedented community response to recent events at Westridge High. We've received over 2,000 emails, hundreds of phone calls, and a petition with nearly 8,000 signatures." She pauses, adjusting her glasses. "After extensive consultation with medical professionals, legal counsel, and educational policy experts, this board has drafted a comprehensive policy revision regarding electronic devices and medical accommodations." The room holds its collective breath as she continues. "Effective immediately, students with documented medical conditions will be permitted to carry both medical devices and cell phones for emergency communication. The revised policy creates a clear exemption process requiring only a doctor's note rather than the previous multi-signature approval system." Murmurs ripple through the crowd. "This is more than we expected, not just allowing medical devices, but phones too." "Additionally," she continues, "all staff will receive mandatory training on recognizing and responding to medical emergencies, with refresher courses required annually. We're also implementing a digital alert system to ensure teachers are properly notified of student medical conditions." Mr. Dela Cruz stands up from his seat in the front row. "And what about students without documented conditions who witness emergencies? Will they still face punishment for using phones to call for help?" Board President Simmons looks uncomfortable. "The policy revision includes a Good Samaritan clause, protecting students who use electronic devices during legitimate emergencies from disciplinary action." The crowd erupts in applause. Marcus's father nods once, satisfied, and sits back down. "One final announcement," President Simmons says once the noise dies down. "Principal Hoffman has submitted his resignation, effective at the end of this semester. We'll be conducting a national search for a replacement who shares our renewed commitment to student safety and well-being." As the meeting continues with procedural details, I feel a tap on my shoulder. It's Marcus, looking healthier than I've seen him since before the incident. "They actually did it," he whispers, his medical alert bracelet catching the fluorescent light as he gestures toward the board. "My dad didn't think they would go this far." "Your dad is kind of terrifying when he gets going," I whisper back. Marcus grins. "You should see him at family game night." The next day at school, there's a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Teachers who once confiscated phones on site now carefully consider whether a student might have a medical exemption. Mrs. Patterson returns to chemistry class with a binder containing laminated medical information cards for every student with a documented condition. "Before we continue with our unit on ionic bonds," she says, her voice steadier than it's been in weeks, "I want to make a statement." The class goes silent as she steps out from behind her desk. What happened to Marcus was inexcusable, and I bear significant responsibility for it. I failed to properly inform myself about his medical needs, and I enforced a policy without considering its potential consequences. Her voice breaks slightly. "I've spent 17 years teaching chemistry, but I clearly have more to learn about caring for my students." She looks directly at Marcus. "I am profoundly sorry for putting your life at risk. There is no policy or rule more important than a student's safety and well-being." Marcus nods, accepting her apology with quiet dignity. The tension that has hung over our classroom for weeks finally begins to dissipate. 2 days later, I'm called to the guidance office during lunch. I assume it's about my college applications, but instead, I find Mr. and Mrs. Dela Cruz waiting with my counselor. "We have something for you," Mrs. Dela Cruz says, handing me an envelope. Inside is a letter from the American Diabetes Association, informing me that I've been awarded their Young Hero Scholarship, $5,000 toward college expenses, in recognition of my quick action during Marcus's emergency. "We nominated you," Mr. Dela Cruz explains. "What you did that day saved our son's life." I stare at the letter, speechless. I just did what anyone would do. But you did it despite knowing you'd be punished, Mrs. Delacruz says softly. That takes real courage. The changes extend beyond our school. The following month, the state education department announces a comprehensive review of all zero-tolerance policies in public schools, citing the incident at our school as evidence that inflexible rules can create dangerous situations. Schools exist to educate and protect students. The commissioner states in a press release, when policies designed to maintain order actively endanger student safety, we have a responsibility to intervene. Marcus embraces his unexpected role as an advocate. He starts a student organization focused on health rights and safety, speaking at other schools about the importance of medical accommodations. His quiet demeanor transforms when he talks about policy reform. He becomes passionate, articulate, commanding. I never wanted to be the face of this issue, he tells me one day as we hang posters for an upcoming awareness event. But if what happened to me can prevent someone else from going through the same thing, then maybe it was worth it. Winter turns to spring, and the changes at school become the new normal. Medical alert bracelets are no longer hidden under sleeves, and students with conditions like diabetes, epilepsy, and severe allergies carry their phones openly, without fear of punishment. Mrs. Patterson has become almost zealous about student safety, attending every medical training session offered and creating detailed emergency response plans for her classroom. The cynical part of me thinks she's overcompensating out of guilt, but the more generous part recognizes genuine growth. 1 year after the incident, I sit in the bleachers watching Marcus walk across the stage at graduation. He's heading to State University in the fall, planning to major in pre-med with a focus on endocrinology. His medical alert bracelet gleams in the sunlight as he accepts his diploma. Principal Hoffman's replacement, Dr. Rivera, gives a commencement address that feels pointed in its message. Rules and policies serve an important purpose in our educational community, but they must never become more important than the well-being of the students they're designed to protect. The measure of a good school isn't perfect compliance. It's how we respond when our systems fail those in our care. After the ceremony, Marcus finds me in the crowd of graduates. I never properly thanked you, he says, suddenly awkward, for what you did that day in chemistry. You don't need to thank me, I reply. I'm just glad you're okay. He nods, then adds, you know what's weird? If all this hadn't happened, the seizure, the policy change, everything, I probably wouldn't be going into medicine. Sometimes I think about how close I came to dying, and it makes me want to make sure that doesn't happen to someone else. As we part ways in the sea of blue caps and gowns, I think about how a single moment of crisis revealed both the worst and best aspects of our school system. The rigid enforcement of a senseless rule nearly cost a student his life, but it also sparked a movement that ultimately made everyone safer. Rules exist to protect students, not endanger them. Sometimes it takes a near tragedy for that simple truth to become clear.